o'clock Eastern, MSNBC will air a special town hall with former President Obama. It's called A Promised Land, and it is hosted by our friend and colleague, Jonathan Capehart. In it, the former president criticizes Donald Trump for his attempts to overturn the election. Listen.
Let's talk about some news of the day, Mr. President. President Trump and his allies in the states are doing everything they can, it seems, to overturn the will of the people. For instance, late Wednesday night, Wayne County Republicans filed affidavits to reverse their votes to certify their votes in Michigan, the most populous county. And I've heard the word coup used to describe these types of efforts. Is that hyperbolic, or is our democracy really under a realistic threat here?
Look, Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. Kamala Harris will be the next vice president. I have been troubled, like I think every American, whether you're a Republican or Democrat or independent, should be troubled when you start having attempts to block, negate, overturn the people's vote when there's no actual evidence that there was anything illegal or fraudulent taking place. These are just bald assertions. They've been repeatedly rejected by the courts, and I think I'm less surprised by Donald Trump doing this. He has shown only a flimsy relationship to the truth. I'm more troubled that you're seeing a lot of Republican officials go along with it, not because they actually believe it, but because they feel intimidated by it. And the degree to which you've seen some news outlets that cater to the right and the conservative viewpoint somehow try to prop up these bogus claims.
I want to see the rest of that conversation. I'm sure you do, too. It airs tonight at 10 o'clock right here. Joining our conversation now is Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large of The Bulwark and an MSNBC contributor. Jason's still with us. Charlie Sykes, I saw a lot of President Obama's restraint in President-elect Biden's press conference today. But where do you put your sentiments about what Trump and Giuliani and Bannon are up to?
Well, I agree, first of all, that Joe Biden is going to be sworn in as the next president of the United States, but that is not to minimize what's going on right now. There are three fundamentally un-American things that Donald Trump is doing right now, and I think they'll have long-term, the damage will be long-term. Number one, first of all, he is the world's greatest sore loser. Number two, we're finding out that he is in the midst of contemplating an authoritarian attack on our democracy, not in some abstract sort of way, but having the legislature actually overturn the vote of the public, which is breathtaking. And number three, he's actively sabotaging this country during wartime, our war against the pandemic. So, whether you want to talk about the traditions of respecting democracy, whether we're talking about this slow motion attempted coup, which is not going to work, but which will delegitimize the election in the eyes of many, or the number of people who will die because he's actively sabotaging the efforts to fight the pandemic. This is an extraordinary moment, and many of the things that we have said for the last 4 or 5 years about Donald Trump, I feel we're reaping it right now. We are reaping what this country has sowed over the last 4 or 5 years by putting someone like Donald Trump in the White House.
I agree with everything you just said, and I need to hear more, especially about what we're witnessing in an authoritarian attack on our democracy. And I completely agree with you. What Trump is doing is sabotaging an incoming wartime leader who will actually do the things that he thought he was going to like doing, but ended up being bored by trying to protect the people he represents from a deadly pandemic. What do you think is behind the fact that only 7 Republican senators have acknowledged the result of a 2-week-old conclusion of the election? More foreign leaders have recognized Joe Biden's victory than Republican senators.
Well, cowardice, obviously, but let's just step back for a moment. This is the easiest possible moment for them to break with Donald Trump. I mean, number one, if there's ever a moment to put country over party, it is this. The lowest hanging fruit in American politics is recognizing the results of a democratic election and being in favor of the peaceful transfer of power, right? Donald Trump is a lame duck. He's lost this election. He's behaving like a crazy man. So at some point, Republicans are going to have to say, if we don't break with him now, are we ever going to break with him? If you don't do it now under these circumstances, are we really willing to be held hostage by Donald Trump forever, for the next 4 years, for the next 8 years? Because if they can't do it now, then when?
It's an excellent point. Jason, I'm old enough to remember that the excuse that Republican senators like Lamar Alexander gave for not aligning themselves with the one Republican senator who did vote with what he recognized was an abuse of power, Mitt Romney, was that, oh, there's an election coming, they'll deal with it. So said election has come, and they won't even recognize it. I mean, what do you think the long-term damage is of all these elected Republican officials refusing to recognize the result of an election in their own country?
Nicole, the damage is on the rest of us, because this election, remember, was an excuse for anything, right? At first, it was the election is the reason that Merrick Garland couldn't be seated, but that didn't matter for Amy Coney Barrett. Then it was like, well, we don't need to impeach him because we've got an election, but now you don't want to believe the election. The core of this, which is why this is dangerous, which is why this will extend beyond Donald Trump being in office, is because you have a large group of Republicans. This really actually, I think this goes back to Gingrich in the 90s. You have a large group of Republicans who at their core do not believe that Democrats can legitimately lead the country. Period. It doesn't matter what the math is. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. It doesn't matter if that person is black or biracial or Joe Biden or Bill Clinton. They don't think Democrats can morally run the country. And therefore, any election that elects anybody who's not a Democrat, they don't think is right. So the problem that we're going to have going forward, Nicole, which is sort of what I mentioned before, is in the same way that Joe Biden is going to have to say, all right, look, can we fix this election rule? Can we fix this loophole? Can we fix this? You're going to have Republicans at state legislatures. We saw what happened in North Carolina. We saw what happened in Michigan. We've seen what's happened in Wisconsin. We're going to see Republican legislators go to those same rule books and try to find ways that they can undermine democracy. They will try and allow faithless electors to operate. They will try and find more obscure rules so that we don't have to listen to the Electoral College. Unless there is leadership from President-elect Joe Biden to say, hey, look, we got to look at this Electoral College. We have to look at the gap of time. We have to make some of these things not tradition, but laws about the handing over of information. We will see this forevermore. This generation of Trumpists are not going to disappear. And whether Trump runs again or one of his kids, this attitude that democracy should only be in the hands of this family and this party is going to continue unless Democrats fight it tooth and nail.
Jason Johnson, Charlie Sykes, two of my most favorite people to talk to during these most extraordinary of times. Thank you. When we come back, among the worst surge in coronavirus cases since the pandemic began, Dr. Anthony Fauci has some